I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my cream-colored dress, when I heard my son Trent's voice through the door. He was talking to his wife Cambria, and their words cut through me like broken glass. Can you believe she's actually going through with this? Marrying some old man she barely knows. Cambria laughed that sharp, mean laugh of hers. At 63, beggars can't be choosers. At least someone's willing to take care of her now that your father's gone. I pressed my hand against the door frame to steady myself. They had no idea I could hear every cruel word they were saying about the man I loved. My late husband Bernard died 4 years ago after a sudden heart attack. Those first 2 years were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up reaching for him and find empty space. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that hurt to remember. Trent barely called during that time. He was busy with his own life, his tech startup, his expensive house in the suburbs. When he did visit, he'd spend the whole time on his phone. Cambria never came at all. She always had an excuse ready. I spent most holidays alone, eating microwave dinners and pretending I wasn't crying. Then 18 months ago, I met Garrison at a community center art class. I'd started taking classes just to get out of the house, to be around living people instead of ghosts. Garrison sat next to me during watercolor painting, and when I accidentally knocked over my water cup, he helped me clean it up without making me feel foolish. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. We started talking and discovered we were both widowed. His wife had passed 3 years before. We understood each other's grief in a way no one else could. That understanding slowly turned into friendship, then something deeper. Garrison was 70 years old, 7 years older than me. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury and wore simple clothes, usually flannel shirts and worn jeans. He drove an old pickup truck that had seen better days. To anyone looking at him, he appeared to be exactly what Trent would later call him. Just some old man, but to me, he was everything. He made me laugh again. He held my hand during movies. He cooked me breakfast and left sweet notes in my purse. After 2 decades of feeling invisible, Garrison made me feel seen, valued, and loved. When I told Trent I was getting remarried, the silence on the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he said, "Mom, are you sure about this? You barely know this guy." I explained that I'd known Garrison for over a year and that I loved him. Trent's voice got tight. "What does he do for work? Where does he live?" I told him Garrison was retired and lived modestly in a small house across town. Another long silence. Then Trent said he'd come to the wedding, but he had concerns. Those concerns, I'd soon learn, were really judgments. The wedding was small, held at a historic garden venue that Garrison had chosen. He'd insisted on paying for everything himself, refusing to let me contribute. The garden was beautiful with white roses and soft lighting. About 30 people were invited, mostly my friends from the art center and book club. Trent and Cambria arrived late, dressed like they were attending a funeral instead of a celebration. Cambria wore all black and didn't bother hiding her disgusted expression. Trent kissed my cheek, but his eyes were cold. He barely looked at Garrison when they shook hands. During the ceremony, I could see Cambria whispering to Trent. They weren't even trying to be subtle. Other guests noticed and looked uncomfortable. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, I actually held my breath, terrified Trent might stand up. He didn't, but the smirk on Cambria's face told me she'd considered it. After we said our vows and kissed, the applause was warm from everyone, except my son and his wife. They clapped slowly, mockingly, like they were watching a joke unfold. My heart broke a little even in my moment of joy. The reception was held in an elegant hall attached to the garden. Round tables with white linens, candles everywhere, and a small band playing soft jazz. Garrison had arranged everything perfectly. But as guests mingled and congratulated us, Trent and Cambria stood in the corner drinking champagne and making no effort to socialize. I watched Cambria point at Garrison's simple suit and whisper something that made Trent laugh. My friend Noel noticed too and squeezed my hand. "Ignore them," she said. "This is your day." But how do you ignore your own child rejecting your happiness? Things got worse during dinner. Trent stood up to give a toast, and my stomach dropped. He raised his glass with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "To my mother," he began, "who has always been strong and independent. I hope she knows what she's doing, and that this new chapter brings her whatever it is she's looking for." The words sounded supportive, but the tone was dripping with condescension. Cambria added loudly, "At least someone's willing to take care of her now." Several guests gasped, Garrison squeezed my hand under the table. His face calm but his jaw tight. After dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed a moment to breathe, to not cry in front of everyone. As I stood in front of the mirror, trying to fix my makeup, Cambria walked in. She didn't even pretend to be nice now that we were alone. "Delphine, we need to talk about your finances," she said, using my first name instead of calling me mom like she used to. "Trent and I are concerned about your assets. Have you considered a prenup? Because if this old man is after your money, you're making a huge mistake." I stared at her in disbelief. I told Cambria that my finances were none of her business, and that Garrison had never asked me for anything. She laughed that cruel laugh again. "Oh, please look at him, he's clearly desperate. That truck he drives is falling apart. His clothes look like they came from a thrift store. Men like that marry women like you for security." I felt my face burn with anger and humiliation. Before I could respond, she continued, "Trent deserves to inherit what his father worked for, not watch it get spent on some gold digger." That's when I realized what this was really about. They were worried about their inheritance. I walked out of the restroom with my head high, but inside I was shaking. How had I raised a son who cared more about money than his mother's happiness? How had I not seen how entitled and cruel he'd become? Cambria had poisoned him, or maybe she'd just revealed what was already there. I returned to the reception and found Garrison talking with some guests. He saw my face and immediately came to me, asking if I was okay. I nodded but couldn't speak without crying. He wrapped his arm around me protectively, and I felt safe despite everything falling apart around me. The moment that changed everything came when the band took a break. The event coordinator approached Garrison and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and stood up, walking toward a microphone at the front of the room. My heart raced. What was he doing? Garrison cleared his throat and the room went quiet. "Thank you all for being here today to celebrate with Delphine and me," he said, his voice stronger than usual. "I know some of you have questions about who I am." His eyes landed directly on Trent and Cambria. "I think it's time I properly introduced myself." Garrison reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. From it, he took out a business card and held it up. "My full name is Garrison Theodore Ashford. Some of you might recognize that name." A woman at the table next to us gasped. An older man stood up, his mouth open in shock. I was confused, having no idea what was happening. Garrison continued, "I'm the founder and former CEO of Ashford Technologies, which I sold 5 years ago for $1.2 billion. The room erupted, people started talking all at once. Trent's face went completely white. I sat frozen in my chair, trying to process what I'd just heard. Garrison, my Garrison who drove an old truck and wore flannel shirts, was a billionaire. He'd never mentioned it. Not once in 18 months. He walked back to me and knelt beside my chair. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said softly. "After my wife died, people treated me differently once they knew about my money. Everyone wanted something. When I met you, you didn't know and you didn't care. You loved me for who I am, not what I have. That was so rare and precious, I couldn't risk losing it." Tears streamed down my face as I understood. He'd been protecting what we had, just like I'd been protecting my heart. I took his hands and told him I didn't care about his money, that I'd loved him when I thought he had nothing, and I loved him now. He kissed me gently while the room applauded. But not everyone was clapping. I looked over at Trent and Cambria. They sat frozen, their faces showing a mixture of shock, horror, and I recognized that look immediately. Regret. They'd just spent the entire evening mocking and insulting a man worth over $1 billion. A man who was now my husband. The coordinator brought out a projector, and suddenly the wall lit up with images. Photos of Garrison receiving business awards, shaking hands with presidents, speaking at technology conferences, articles from Forbes and Fortune magazine, headlines about his company's innovations, and his massive charitable donations. With each image, Trent seemed to shrink further into his chair. Cambria had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth. Other guests came up to congratulate us, some admitting they'd recognized Garrison's name immediately. My friend Noel hugged me and whispered, "Your son just learned an expensive lesson about judging people." After the presentation, Trent approached us. His confidence had completely vanished. "Mr. Ashford, I mean Garrison. I need to apologize," he stammered. I didn't realize, I didn't know who you were." Garrison looked at him calmly. Would it have mattered? Should your mother only deserve respect and happiness if she marries someone wealthy? Does my bank account change the fact that I love her? Trent had no answer. Cambria tried to join the conversation, suddenly friendly and warm, but Garrison simply turned away. The damage was done, they'd shown their true selves, and there was no taking it back. The rest of the evening was beautiful. Garrison and I danced under the lights while genuine friends celebrated with us. Before we left, Garrison pulled me aside and told me something that made me love him even more. He'd already planned to establish a trust fund in my name, completely separate from anything he owned, ensuring I'd always be financially independent regardless of what happened. He'd also set up a charitable foundation, in Bernard's name, to honor my late husband's memory. He wasn't trying to replace Bernard or buy my love. He was simply loving me the way I deserved, completely and selflessly. 3 days after the wedding, Trent called. His voice was small, ashamed. He apologized for his behavior and Cambria's, admitting they'd been horrible and judgmental. He said he wanted to make things right. I told him I appreciated the apology, but that he'd revealed something important that night. He'd cared more about money than my happiness, more about inheritance than my joy. I said we could rebuild our relationship, but it would take time and genuine change. As for Garrison and me, we're planning to travel the world, donate to causes we believe in, and enjoy every moment of this second chance at love. My son learned that day that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in character, kindness, and the courage to love without conditions. Never judge someone by their appearance, their clothes, or their car. The richest person in the room might be wearing the oldest shoes. More importantly, never let money determine how you treat people, especially your own family. My son spent years taking me for granted because he saw me as just his widowed mother with a modest life. He couldn't imagine I deserved love or respect unless it came with a financial benefit to him. That kind of thinking destroys relationships and reveals ugly truths about character. If you have aging parents who are finding love again, support them, celebrate their courage to open their hearts after loss. Because one day, you might need that same courage, and you'll hope someone treats you with the kindness you showed others. Love isn't about status or wealth, it's about finding someone who sees your worth. Never judge people by external appearances. Character reveals itself in how we treat others when we think there's nothing to gain. Respect your parents' choices, especially in their pursuit of happiness. Before you go, I need to know something. What hit you the hardest, the betrayal? The moment everything fell apart? The twist you never saw coming? Drop it in the comments right now. And tell me what you want to see next. Medical fraud, family secrets, financial crimes, hidden identities. Your ideas become our next stories. If this story kept you glued to the screen, hit that like button. If you want more shocking true stories that expose the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. The next one drops soon, and it's going to shake you even harder. See you there.